Okay, we'll call to order the August 21st meeting of the Grand Forks Public Schools. We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance, and as a reminder, the flags have moved to my right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Brenner is unfortunately out sick today, so as we move to the approval of the agenda, he had a heavy part in the remote learning survey results and the storm day making decision process. So I would ask that we approve the agenda, striking items 6A and 6B, and we'll save those for our next agenda. Okay, motion by Dr. Lunn. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Oh, I always forget the norms. They're tucked right under there. Dave, would you be willing to read the norms today? I'll give you the sheet here.
Our school board norms: be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, advocate on behalf of students, and keep the community in mind.
Thank you, Dave. We're also going to go back a second. Each of you received an amended consent agenda as well. So I'd ask for a motion to amend the consent agenda, adding in another third-party entity onto the request for student information. Motion by Dr. Shab. Is there a second? Second by Joel. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Now we have our appointment of our student board member and oath of office, Ryan. We'll now approve the minutes from the August 7th meeting. Do I have a motion for
I'll make a
approval?
motion to approve.
Motion by Dr. Shab. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Monty. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're now to the portion of our meeting for public comment. As a reminder, individuals wishing to address the school board are asked to complete a public comment card. We do have one. Each person may speak for up to 3 minutes. No individual may speak on the same topic more than once. As school board, public comments and concerns will be directed to the superintendent of schools. We aren't allowed to dialogue back and forth during the public comment period. So I have one comment here. Nelson Rossett, is that how you say your name? Okay, come on up to this microphone here, and Brandon can help you get it turned on there.
Okay, I saw the design for the new middle school was on the agenda. I was hoping there might be some information on that, but I guess I'll just go with my comments. Okay, uh, Board of Education members, my name's Nelson Rossett. I'm a resident of the north end of the city of Grand Forks, and I would like to discuss the plot of land that the school district recently acquired from the Park District. Now, this land was formerly part of the University Park, is now part of the campus of the Valley Middle School. Now, this new plot contains a grassy swale and a fine grove of mature shade trees. Now, Superintendent Brenner has pledged that no trees will be cut down to build the new school. And this is very good to hear. However, there's more than one way to kill a tree. And I'm referring here to soil compaction and grade change, which are often the effects of construction activity. The detrimental effects of soil compaction and grade change on mature trees is well documented. Just to cite a couple of sources, Purdue University publication entitled Landscape Report ran an article 2019 written by arborist Lindsay Purcell, and it's entitled The Silent Tree Killer, Compaction. Earlier this year, University of Maryland Extension Service posted an article on their website entitled Grade Change Problems with Trees. The post warns, and I quote, older, well-established trees are very sensitive to grade changes around their root systems. And I will say a lot of people don't understand the root systems of trees. The trees are not nearly, they're rooted not nearly as deep as many people think, but their root system extends well beyond the drip line. The drip line is the outer part of the crown of the tree. So the bottom line is to ensure the health of this grove and to preserve the park-like qualities of this parcel. There needs to be a significant buffer zone between any construction activity and this tree line. Now, to put these trees into a larger context or perspective, Grand Forks has lost thousands of its elms over the last several decades due to Dutch elm disease. We're also slated to lose thousands more of ash trees in the coming decade due to the emerald ash borer, which has devastated ash trees to the south and east of here. And it's been documented in Moorhead, Minnesota, and it's heading this way. So most of the trees in the grove that I'm mentioning are cottonwoods, the iconic tree of the northern plains. So we may be losing our elms and ashes, but hopefully we can save these cottonwoods. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossett. Up next, we do have the update of the new Valley Middle School. Yeah.
Thank you, Amber, for passing that baton. So as you mentioned, we do have Kyle Kavami here from Icon Architects. He's going to give us a design and build update for Valley Middle School as he is working with our public commenter there and giving him some information on how to contact him about this important issue about the trees. I just want to extend a thanks on the behalf of the district to Kyle. He has been engaging, he and his counterparts have been engaging recently with a multitude of constituents, meeting after meeting after meeting with all of the department reps from Valley Middle School, with other entities to make sure that they have information from a myriad of perspectives in which to continue the build process. So Kyle, welcome. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Yep, it's nice to be back here and update on this process. It's really exciting to see, and we do have a slide to touch on that topic earlier from the public comment, and I think that we'll hope to align with that. We do have a landscape architect that's working on the project. That this is very important, so this isn't something we take lightly either. So we'll talk through that once we get warmed up here. To just shut off? No, it's okay. All right. Yeah. There we go. Perfect. So just again, a quick update on Valley. The design process has been pretty thorough, and I think we've engaged a lot of different team members, and it just goes to show you, all the work that we do before this gets approved and then is nothing in comparison to the work after and how much. And I would say we switch from focusing on the public to focusing on the staff. And it's been really exciting to get all the feedback and to listen to things as these meetings have transpired. So one of the things just want to highlight again, I think at the start of every meeting, we want to take just a moment and make sure we understand the vision statement that was derived from the community group during those meetings, why this project exists, what's the purpose of the project at its core. And this is something that again, we don't ever deviate from, and just want a quick reminder of that. To give you a point of the schedule, so you can see here, we're sitting right here in the design process, currently going through the design development phase, which to give everybody an idea, in the early phases we have boxes, and now we're putting doors and cabinetry and thinking about that. And then finally the next phase will be construction, when we're actually issuing documents and things like that to be bid out. So happy to talk through that. We're working full steam ahead with our construction partner, construction engineers, just finalizing different aspects of the schematic design with them in the last meetings. And we'll be able to answer questions with you, should there be any afterwards. So one of the neat things that has been integrated within this whole process of design is thinking of Grand Forks and thinking of the town and thinking of the river, and how do you incorporate the river flowing through the town as the life flowing through the school. So you'll see that as we go through this. It's kind of neat to see how they've represented that and how all the different design team members have done that. And to be clear, I didn't do the design. I'm just going to take the credit from it for you guys, but I didn't do any of it. But they did an amazing job. So here's the discussion there. So you can see, again, the green kind of represents the city, right? And then the blue actually will flow from the outside within through the school, so that you'll have that sense of, the river is connecting the whole community. The river is driving the community. It's why we're here as a city. And it's important to represent that as part of the Red River Valley. You can see there's some kind of different elements. And as you can see here, here's the site plan. You can see there's some things have shifted a little bit. So overall, it looks very similar to some of the designs that you've seen before, but we've maybe made things a little bit more perpendicular or squared some things off just to create efficiency as we're going through this design. We've also focused a lot on parking. So you can see here we're at 147 total parking spots. We've shifted things around where the fields are, where the practice field is. There's a lot of advantages. For example, just maybe most recently we shifted the home field from a north-south or from an east-west to a north-south. That just makes playing games in the evening a little bit easier. You're not looking into the sun half the time. Just lots of advantages, and then it allows us to shuffle the parking around a little bit and create some more spaces on the lot. So really, really happy with how that's turned out, and lots of decisions still to be made with the park land as far as the land swap, but the land is allocated in there. So here you can see a landscape plan. So this is with our landscape architect. It's great to have someone like that on the team. They're really focused on making sure that the community impact is impacted in a positive way, and that we're tying in and honoring University Park and not detracting from that. And you can see kind of there, if you guys were to look at that vertical line that's wavy, so that's the tree line of University Park itself. So you can see where we are, and then you can see also here, there's a line right there that's going vertical, so that's a fire access road. We're currently discussing with the city what that looks like, and can we minimize that, and so that there's more green space and less pavement or access through that manner. And also, knowing the way that we've got this set up, there is, if the need should arise 10 years, 15 years down the road where you need to add classrooms, there's the ability to do that. Again, we've maintained the central core right down the middle, where you've got your performing arts space, or your performing space, your common space, your library, your access, cafeteria, your access for after-school events, but yet you can still secure your classroom wings. And then the classroom wings are stacked so that you'll see mirrors. This is showing the kind of the first floor plan, but you'd see a mirror on that south, and then a mirror on the north end as well.
Kyle, can I read the small print since it's pertinent to our
Yeah.
speaker? So, along the green line,
Yep. So that green line there for folks.
there's a notation in the plans that says outline of existing trees to remain and be protected. And then on the other side, it says provide a tree protecting fence along entire perimeter of tree line. Keep all construction material and or equipment out of protection area. So just wanted to note that.
Yeah, and first of all, I can't believe that your young eyes can read that font. But secondly, I also recall from our last design team meeting that because of wanting to offer more protection for the tree line, I believe the whole campus was shifted east. I can't recall how far east, but I know that they shifted the building further away from the trees to build in a greater buffer zone. And so I want to give some credit to the architects and the design team for thinking through all of that.
Yeah, I believe it was 8 feet. Does that sound right? 7 or 8 feet, yeah. Just for the sole purpose of the buffer to the park. Shift onto here. So we'll talk about exterior. So a little bit more developed. We're seeing, neutral colors, things that are, I would say, long-lasting and nice looking, but not over the top, and something that we think would really blend well in the community. As much glass as possible through the entryways, through the learning courtyard. You can see the way things are laid out. I think we're playing with the learning courtyard, and maybe we flip-flop, where the pavement is versus where the green space is, just to maximize sun, and lots of great decisions that are taking place with our different design team members. And then here's the exterior view that you can see on the site.
Kyle, there's a couple pictures that look like the one side is slanted, and then there's the design that kind of looks very square. Is it slanted or is it square?
It was more slanted. It's now square. So this spot right here still is the spot inside the Learning Commons does still have an angle. I think in an effort to manage costs, we squared things off where possible just to make things a little bit more efficient. So when this render was done, maybe this one looks like it's squared, but then this one isn't. So appreciate that, yeah. So again, it would be squared off, and then you can see the access. And lastly, from the north, so your receiving drop-off into your back of house, bus potential drop-off, and then again, you can see it's not squared up. And then your gym area up towards the north, so that high volume space. And then lastly, just showing on some of the materials, a blend of brick, of metal panel. It's really neat. We've got some cool texture going on the metal panel so that it's visually interesting. It's not a pole barn. It's hardy, but at the same point, it looks really cool. And then precast. So all of these different pieces are still in flux as we go through design. It might be that some things shrink or some things expand just based on budget and just based on availability. There's long lead time items, so it could be that something makes sense now, but in 3 months doesn't. We're still working through that to finalize the design, but as it sits now, this is kind of the mix of materials and the colors that we're thinking of. And then just to show, so this was our block diagram from all the work with the committee. And you can see from that to here, it's definitely different, but the core pieces are the same, which is kind of neat because, again, if you were here those nights, you saw the different versions and how it was kind of synthesized into this. So you can kind of say, like, there's people that were involved in placing certain things that were not part of the design team, that were part of the community. And I just hope that they see this and see that we're, honoring that. And so much of it aligns with exactly how it was before. Lots of design work, obviously, but really, really neat to know that the community members really made an impact on how we laid things out. And then the upstairs is the same mirror of the downstairs with the media space above the admin space. You can see that kind of that central area is open to below, so it's large, high volume space, lots of natural light kind of in that center spot, and then kind of balancing that within the learning pods. And just to give you guys an example of what that dispersed media looks like. So media center, library, that's a term that is loose and I would say is changing. And I think we had talked about it before, maybe at a board level or maybe at a committee level. But this is something that we're doing across the state now, where we're dispersing media throughout the school and or library, dispersing books throughout the school, saving some of that space and using it for more targeted needs with like media centers, like robotics, like STEM, all these different things that you can do to give collaborative space, but not close it off, and then kind of have books strategically located throughout the school. It's really neat, and I'm really appreciative of us doing that model for this. And then you can see here all the different zones of where it's set up. And what's neat too is it's kind of targeting the different grade levels. So there's appropriate content in the different areas. Really, really neat. So next steps, again, steering committee meetings, going through the design, interior package will be coming up soon. And working through, with the interior, it's the tile and the paint and carpet and lots of decisions to be made still yet. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Kyle. Any questions? Go ahead, Dr. Love.
Thanks, Kyle. Great update, and it's a lot of good hard work. I've heard rumors, so I just want to ask: has there been any thought about using the outdoor learning commons as a place to eat on those good days in the fall and in the spring, those 2 or 3 days that we have during the school year?
I think you can see there's some tables set up there, and I think that's sure the hope. There'd be 2 days a year that would be packed. Yeah, I think that's the intent. But I think that's something that's determined at the administrative level.
Other questions for Kyle? Go ahead, Cynthia.
I've just had some questions about the windows. I figure that you've talked with teachers in particular because of distraction. There's some people that have asked about the level of windows, because both the Career and Tech Ed Center has a lot of windows and this has a lot of windows, just in terms of distractibility and safety as well.
Yeah, I can't speak to the exact conversations, but I can say exterior facing windows are something that we want to include and embrace as much as possible. And you're absolutely right on interior facing windows, even the layout of where the glass is on the door, different things like that to bring in natural light but not increase distraction. I couldn't speak exactly to how they're implementing that. I honestly think it's still being worked through, because that's the next part of this, but I know that that's a big part of the consideration.
It is, and one of the things that they've brought forth conceptually many times is the concept of glazing, to try to mute the visual lines, especially from those looking in, so we're not going to be able to have kids be so distracting, but the natural light and things of that nature will flow through those spaces.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Catherine, this will be a question for you maybe. So is it still I don't know if it's a policy or a process, like the last time I was in my classroom, I had to have all my windows covered, like in the doorway and in the panel. Is that still something that we're employing in the district? And if so, how does that impact the New Valley building?
Yeah, great question. So you're talking about safety and security there. So that is something that we've talked about several times through the design process, and in that process, they have determined spaces within the classroom that would be out of visual sight lines from the windows, despite the fact that there is an increased number of windows available. So that is part of their strategic planning. They have safety and security at the forefront of their minds constantly.
Other questions? Our students who knew Valley, attended Valley, anything, how does this look and feel for you?
I went to Valley and it looks way nicer. Kind of wishing that I didn't go to Valley until this this one got built, but yeah, it looks really nice, and I think it's I think it'll do a lot of good for not only people going to Valley, but for the community as well.
I think we'll quote him on that. If we can get permission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval? Motion by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dave. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll now move on to item 7B, district academic goals. Ms. Glatch?
Thank you, President Flynn. You can see on page 63 of your packet a memo from Dr. Brenner regarding our district academic goals. Just to remind the crew here, this is a direct result of the training we went through with the Department of Instruction that was called the Be Legendary training. That training was spurred by the fact that we have a school, actually Valley Middle School, that is on comprehensive service status through our title efforts. And that means basically that there have been years, consecutive years, in which our aggregate students have performed in the bottom 5% of the state. And so we are working hard to rectify that. Many of those wheels have already been put in motion by Valley administrators and teachers to change that trajectory. But the memo in front of you outlines the district goals in which we're going to be more explicit about aligning across the district, not just at Valley Middle School, but across the district. So I'd like to read to you how those goals are drafted, just so that our viewing public can hear. So around literacy, it reads as follows. Grand Forks Public Schools will increase district-wide student ELA, which is English Language Arts, proficiency levels from 46% to 51% as measured by the North Dakota Accountability Assessments, NDSA, which is the North Dakota State Assessment, and ACT. Proficiency levels are reported on the North Dakota Insights dashboard. That is our accountability dashboard that's viewable by any public member that chooses to go in and look at it. Building administrators, as far as some steps taken to achieve that goal, building administrators will establish ELA proficiency goals across content areas that explicitly target student groups to close achievement gaps. So those student groups may vary according to the data at any individual building. So Kelly Elementary's student achievement goals may vary slightly than, say, Lewis and Clark's, but all of them will be focused on literacy in their goal writing. Those goals will go on what's called our Cognia Student Improvement Dashboard. You're going to hear a lot about Cognia and our student improvement processes this year. So just know that there's a way for us to chronicle those that are public as well. Intentional focus will also be given on improving student ELA proficiency rates at grade 3 from 41% to 48% proficiency as measured by monitoring STAR scores that predict proficiency levels on the NDSA. The reason we explicitly targeted grade 3 is because grade 3 is known nationally as one of those pivotal ages in which we want kids to be able to read and absorb and retain content. You've heard before about learning to read and then reading to learn. That's where that crucial turning point comes. And so that goal is a more aggressive goal because in order for us to continue progress on closing the achievement gaps, we need to make sure that we are having more aggressive efforts at some levels than others. Does that make sense? Okay. And then finally, letter C there is district-wide progress monitoring through the STAR assessment. So the STAR assessment will be used as our interim assessments to check progress along the way, so we're not waiting just until the end of the year, that summative report from the North Dakota State Assessment. So any questions around the literacy goal that I could answer at this time?
I guess for me, goals are supposed to be measurable, which some of them are. But C, for example, isn't. And really A, I guess just is, what is it? Just stating that some target groups you'll establish those goals. So I don't know how you're going to measure progress on those.
Great question. The progress measurement will occur on number 1, which is us increasing our student proficiency levels. And this is intended to capture some of the mechanisms that we're going to use to actually implement progress towards those goals. So those weren't intended to be goals that were measured in and of themselves, but just an overview of some of the action steps that would be taken to align the efforts. So I'm sorry if that's confusing the way this is laid out.
No, except that B is a measurable goal.
That is a checkpoint along the way towards that number 1, the aggregate goal. That is correct. It's a more aggressive sub-goal. And then underneath where it talks about the STAR assessment being the measuring devices, those are our progress monitoring tools that we'll be using. So that's a great question, Dr. Shab. So again, in the end, what we're intending to actually measure and track is what's listed in number 1 there.
And remind us how you came from 46 to 51%?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we did a lot of calculations around that number, and we broke it down to the number of students that would have to be impacted. And so, in reviewing different literature about how much of a percentage of improvement should be gained by any sort of system. It really depends on the number of students that you're addressing. So if we were in, PSIC, we'd have a different percentage rate and fewer kids to impact in order to improve greater gains, if you're with me so far. And so this percentage is just based on guidance and documents and advice that we've been given from our state partners, from some literature reviews that we've done, and then just looking at the aggregate number of kids that it would impact. I can't tell you right now, I don't recall from that planning process how many kids we'd have to move the needle on to realize this goal, but it was significant. And so it's a goal that is achievable. It's also aggressive in nature. And so 5 percentage points might not look like that much of a gain, but again, the number of students that we serve across the board, it really is a significant improvement. All right, thank you. So go on to the mathematics goals. You'll see a very similar format, so I apologize because it might be confusing as this last one was, but I'll do my best to explain. So the second aggregate goal is that Grand Forks Public Schools will increase district-wide student mathematical proficiency levels from 40% to 45% as measured by North Dakota State Accountability Assessments, the NDSA, and the ACT. Proficiency levels are reported on the North Dakota Insights dashboard. And again, some of the checkpoints or the tools to do so along the way, and these are not all inclusive. As I mentioned, we're gonna come back to you and give you some more comprehensive plans after this. But building administrators will begin by establishing math proficiency goals that explicitly target student groups to close achievement gaps. Similar to ELA, there are student groups that have greater gaps in their proficiency levels, and we want to make sure that we're explicitly targeting those students from an equity standpoint. We'll also have intentional focus on improving student math proficiency rates at grade 8 from 32% to 40% proficiency as measured by monitoring STAR scores that predict proficiency levels on the NDSA. And that is, again, a more aggressive goal. 8th grade, again, why a touch point there? 8th grade is when the mathematics switch to a more nonlinear, more conceptual mathematics. And a lot of times if students struggle with pre-algebra to algebra, which is right in that grade span, it can be a barrier to graduation eventually. So those are foundational, kind of a pivotal time in their mathematics trajectory. And then finally, district-wide progress monitoring through the STAR assessment. Again, not intended to be a goal, but how we're going to track through those interim assessments. The rest of the memo is just some of the acronyms broken down. I'm sorry if I didn't explain those along the way. The STAR stands for the Standardized Testing and Reporting Assessment. And otherwise, I am here to entertain questions about the mathematics goals or anything else in regards to our district-aligned goals.
I'm trying to remember because the retreat was over 2 months ago, and at my age, you forget. But I thought when we were working on goals, we talked about multi-year goals, and I see these are 1-year goals. Is the intention that there will be a year 2 and a year 3?
Correct.
goal?
Correct. I mean, if you look at the endpoints, thank you for asking that question. The endpoints that are set here from 46 to 51%, 51% is not where we're going to stop. That's not acceptable. We will intend to increase that trajectory in ensuing years as well. So thank you for calling attention to that, Dr. Lund.
Are there other questions from board members? Go ahead, Monty.
Ms. Glatch, will you remind me, and I know I should know this, but so if I'm an 8th grade teacher and I'm not teaching math, do I just have some, will the building administrators say have some other kinds of goals, or will they want, how does that get inclusive for everybody?
So happy you asked that question there, Board Member Gockler. So we are asking, you're familiar with the fact that we have a schedule that allows for professional learning communities to meet, our PLC schedule. And we are asking every single PLC to set a goal in either literacy or math so that they are across the board aligning their efforts with our district-wide goals. And so I'm looking over here at our astound middle school band member, our teacher down here, Mr. Olson. So Mr. Olson's department, when I was talking with their PLC leader about what possible goals might look like there, we talked about how reading music and music-based literacy really does enhance student literacy, reading skills and that sort of thing. When I was talking to that PLC leader about shifting to thinking to some of the frustrations that maybe teachers face when they're working with kids, like some of the concepts that kids struggle to get, that leader said, rhythm. Rhythm is about math. It's about fractions. Is there a way that they can explicitly deconstruct some of the rhythms in the music department that would also help have an ancillary effect on students' understanding of mathematical fractions? So that's an example of how each of the departments will work to align on their PLC goals, and then that will directly tie into their feedback, their coaching feedback and observation cycles, so that when IDCs or instructional design coaches or building administrators are conferencing with teachers about their teaching practices, they'll talk to them about do any of these strategies align with this district-wide achievement goal. So we're really working hard to really align our system so that every one of our teachers and every player in the system has a hand in working towards these collective goals. You may.
I actually read about this in the school board magazine that we all get, and I actually reached out to this person in Washington, D.C., because there was an article about a lady who had done some research about teaching culturally sensitive math to Native American students in Fort Yates. And so I wanted to find out more about that, and it's a long story and didn't end up where I thought it was going to end, but it piqued my interest, and I know that in the state of New Mexico, they have some really interesting initiatives that are taking place around the topic of teaching culturally sensitive math. And I didn't know if we have anybody who's pursuing that, and this might not be the place to bring that up, I apologize, but it lends to this proficiency rate, because 40% proficiency in math is still not like awesome. It's good, but right, yeah, there's room for growth there. And so I just thought that might be an interesting something to pursue at some point, or it might lend itself to some PLC who's thinking about something like that as well, because I know that it's out there. I don't know a lot about it, but anyway, thank you.
Yep, another great question. And I imagine as we go through the year and we're reporting back to you on strategies and things of that nature, that topic will come up in particular. So really what you're talking about is, at least my understanding of that sort of practice means that anytime a student learns and learns well, they are able to see themselves in the curricula and relate to the topics at hand. So there's all kinds of research that talks about biases in tests, for example. And when a test question might come up that talks about something that is very Midwestern, right? So how many pieces of lefse are represented in this pie, right? When you cut it up into pieces, just talking about lefse, it's not the greatest example, I apologize. That in and of itself is not going to resonate with kids. It's going to throw some kids off because they have no idea what that is. And so really making sure that we are having students see themselves in the curricula is an important part of belonging and feeling safe in a classroom, but also being able to have that Velcro to which they can attach the content. So it's about really deconstructing and making connections along the way with all students.
Any other questions, Dr. Allen?
I know the timeline for the development and approval of these goals this year was kind of predicated by our retreat in June. I'm wondering if there's a sweet spot of when future years we would be approving goals so that the building level, the department level, and even the individual instructor levels will be getting them at a time that they can work with them. I don't know if you guys have thought about that for future years, especially if the goals change. I mean, right now it's math and literacy. Maybe in 3 years there might be a completely different one. So.
Yes is the answer. The hard part is that we are a little bit hamstrung about when the NDSA reports come out from the state. And in all honesty, we wrote these goals, and about a week ago, which was a week later after finally crafting the goals, we got new data and only partial data from the state about their proficiency rates. So we updated them according to our latest, not looking at the 21-22 data, but looking at the 22-23 data. So if we get those results back more quickly, we can certainly do so. But otherwise, to your point, this is going to be a multi-year goal. I don't see math and literacy going off the radar for some time. Might we augment that with some of the other data concerns that were illuminated during our retreat? We talked about choice readiness. We talked about attendance and graduation rates, especially with some subgroups. Really, if we tackle these goals well, many of those improvements will come alongside, which is why we just focused on 2. But what happened in the interim is that we gave our building administrators a heads up at their joint administrative meeting, which was the first week in August. And they all have their back-to-school launches, and they built in placeholders where they could talk about the actual data goals. Same thing, we met with our curriculum PLC leaders and told them this is coming down the pike. And so we finally sent them the actual vernacular around it. It wasn't enough time for them to build that into their back-to-school PD. So it was last minute-ish, but not terrible.
Any additional questions? Okay, thank you.
So if administrative recommendation is that the school board adopt these academic goals, the academic goals 1 and 2 for the 2023-2024 school year, please.
Okay, Dr. Lund motion, is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, now we will move on to item C, consideration to expend construction services against building fund. Brandon?
Yes, Chairwoman Flynn, members of the board. In accordance with North Dakota Century Code, it just outlines in the start of your memo that what our building fund dollars can be used for, primarily construction, renovation, and improvement for our school buildings, as what relates to tonight's conversation. During this fiscal year and recent ones, we've used our general fund to pay for some of our construction projects, and there's a little bit of history to that, but the board has directed the administration to do less of that, and eventually with our building fund levy increasing to be more self-sustained, so that all capital improvement projects are really relegated to the building fund as opposed to the general fund. During the course of this year, we still did incur or account some of those projects into our general fund. And so this, like last year, you might recall, is meant to rectify that or bring that balance back to where we'd like to see that. The memo articulates that we saw an expenditure of almost $1.3 million related to construction services. Not all of those are capital improvements. Some of those are more of our maintenance ongoing costs. But a portion of those were capital projects. And in the memo, they articulate just over $500,000 of those belong to really 4 projects. There was a reconstruction of Grand Forks Central's front staircase and side, completion of a Kelly window project, fire suppression system and plumbing design work that went into the Ben Franklin project this summer, and then the central stage had actually received ADA compliance, a lift. And so those accounted for the $500,000 are identified here. And what I'm asking to do is to move the accounting from the general fund to the building fund. So this would have an impact on that building fund, as I note there, just reducing that ending balance from 9.15 million to 8.65 million. We're certainly keeping in mind the health of the building fund and the future projects within that fund. Happy to answer questions, of course, but the administrative recommendations to approve the attached expenses so we can account those against the building fund rather than the general.
Any questions? I'll look for a motion to approve the attached expenses against the building fund in the amount of $503,168,090. Motion by Bill, is there a second? Second by Josh. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carried. We'll now move on to item D, consideration of special reserve fund transfer.
Yes, thank you. As you may recall, our school district has the ability and does levy 3 mills for a special reserve fund. The North Dakota Century Code keeps that money there as a rainy day fund and can be only used when you exceed your budget in certain instances, including teacher salaries, heat, light, fuel. In this case, during the fiscal year 23, our general fund expenses were over budget 1.6 million related to substitute teacher salaries. 2 main components and explanation for that is a title change, which would have relegated them just a little bit differently into our financial reports. And then secondly, a little bit of shortage of teachers, but we had a lot of the international talent coming too, and we had folks filling in. And so we did get that number off in our budgeting process, so we exceeded. What that's done for us today is it does trigger the allowance of us to tap into our special reserve fund, which has accumulated to a balance of just over 2 million. And per North Dakota Century Code, we can take up to 50%. In recent years, we've done just that. Last year, we took a little less than 50% in an effort to grow that rainy day fund. It'd be my recommendation that we do take that 50%, knowing that we are still working in our this year's budget and the coming budget to overcome, just to correct some of the investment within salaries, that $2 million budget shortfall that Dr. Brenner's talked about coming out of negotiations. So this will allow us to address that with this transition too. What I meant to clarify is we have a choice here of we can take up to 50%, so we can certainly take less. And if you did do that, you could save your rainy day fund for future years. But this would allow us to take the maximum amount, which would be available to us because we would get it into our general fund and help offset this year's shortfall and letting that accumulate future years' balance. If that was any clearer. Administrative recommendation is to approve the transfer of $1,014,229,000.37 from the special reserve fund to the general fund to offset that over budget salary expense. Happy to answer some questions.
Are there any question?
Just a clarification for the sake of the minutes, there seems to be one digit missing in the expense over budget, at least in my copy. It's the last digit, so it's a matter of $1 or $10 or whatever it is. But if it is 1.6 million, then there's something on the end.
Yep. Sorry. You can pull that. Clarify it.
As long as it gets into the minutes, I think it's fine. I don't think it's going to change our action. Like I said, if it's the last digit, it's
Unless it's a comma versus a digit,
well,
yeah.
okay.
It's 16 grand versus, yeah.
The commas won't move.
Okay,
Yes.
sounds good. That's all we need to know. Do we have a motion or any discussion, comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the administrative recommendation of transferring $1,014,229.37.
Is there a second? Second by Joel. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign, or nay. Motion carries. Now move to item E of the Brandon Show, consideration of bid for filtration services.
Yes, thank you. Every year we go to bid for our filtration services because we have a number of them, and this does exceed in total the cost and the ceiling of $50,000 where we should bid that. For the second year in a row, we've only gotten the one response on the, we got a second response last year. This year we got just one written response from Techniques Filtration, and they have held this contract for at least 2 years previous. After reviewing the proposal, it was deemed responsible and met the district needs, and therefore the administrative recommendation is to approve Techniques Filtration as the supplier for the district HVAC filter.
Is there a motion for approval? Motion by Cynthia. Is there a second? Second by Bill. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carried. Item F, consideration of A&E firm for Grand Forks Central High School pool.
Yes, thank you. As you recall, a previous board meeting, we had set aside a selection committee to consider an A&E firm to consider the potential of recommissioning the Grand Forks Central High School pool. The selection committee is articulated in the memo, but you will read that we had representation from the school district in Dr. Brenner, myself, Jonathan Elwine, our B&G director, and Eric Holm, our maintenance supervisor. And we were joined by our construction managers at risk on the project, construction engineers, represented by Mike Dunn and Tom McDonald. Selection committee received just one written response for the A&E services, and it was by JLG Architects. So we had decided to interview that response, and we did go through the interview with them. I will add, it was very informative in that interview. They went through and articulated an understanding of our situation where we have probably a number of things that we could do with Central Pool. Anywhere from do nothing more with it or all the way to a more permanent solution to fix that pool. And so they laid out the ability, because this is an RFQ, it's a request for qualification, their ability to address all of those scenarios, knowing that there might be other options, even a possible public referendum later this year from the park district, school, or the city. And so they were able to respond directly to our needs. So I just wanted to highlight that although they were the only respondent, it was this selection committee's opinion that it was a strong response. After reviewing them, the administrative recommendation is to approve JLG Architects as the A&E firm for the potential recommissioning of Grand Forks Central High School. Happy to answer the question.
Any question? Go ahead.
Was JLG the architects for that addition to Central, the original architect?
I think so. I'm
I think so.
motioning yes, because I think I did a walking tour with Lonnie Lafine and he talked about it, but I'm not entirely
I'm
sure.
pretty sure, and they did have some recent history even on the some of the bricks that were fixed on the outside of the pool just a few short years ago when they began to fall off due to the humidity coming through.
Mhm. Go ahead.
I have a couple questions. So you said everything from doing nothing to building a pool. Do you think this bid also includes repurposing the area? Because I don't remember what year it was, but there was a time when I went through a tour of the school, and there were ideas how to use that area if it wasn't a pool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would just clarify, this wasn't a bid in that they were responding with tangible ideas. They suggested a couple of thoughts. This is a process to assess if they're qualified to be that partner with us in design, so they would look for us to give direction. So I think to your question, yes, it would include that. If that's the direction that the school board takes it, then they would design for that.
There was a meeting this morning with the city. I was not involved in the meeting about the pool for the city and the park district. I don't really know who all was involved in that meeting, but I know we keep saying the potential, and I feel like we are still at potential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agree with me that we are still in the potential phase.
Yeah, I could comment. So there were two meetings from the city, one on Friday, one on Monday, and I think the city's pulling in all stakeholders to be a part of the conversation. They're at their own pivotal point of deciding what they want to do with a couple of concepts, including a citywide turf facility as well as adjacent aquatic center. They've worked very hard to work through a number of different potentials, to use the word, and they're trying to narrow it. And we represented the school district's opinion, the school board's opinion, in that we're moving forward with a design firm because number one priority would be to make sure that we have water for students come next year if the hyssop does come down. So we'll continue to design in that way, and the architects would work in that way. If indeed, something new comes on, like that concept of a facility is going to be built, then we would need to bring that back to the school board to make sure that works into the calculus. But it's tough to see, and I think all we can do is to plan to make sure we have water available to us next summer.
Go ahead.
Brett, thank you for all of that. I would just be more curious about the current community pool conversation before we make a decision about proceeding with the pool at Grand Forks. I think we would want to be cautious about that because of the price tag and because of the age of the pool. I think it's important that our kids have a swimming pool. I'm not saying that, but but I would really want to know what the rest of the community is doing regarding a turf or a community pool before we say yay to, yes to building, or to putting more money into a pool, especially when we're looking at the current deficit that we're in. I just really am quite concerned about.
Go ahead.
I don't think approving this tonight interferes with any of that. I mean, this is just hiring the architectural firm to help us work through that. I think we're all going to be pie in the sky if we think there's going to be a community aquatic center built in 12 months. Now, could it be 2 years or 3 years? And that might factor into some of our decisions, but I don't think it'll affect the decision tonight to hire JLG to do this work. So, and we're not talking about lots of money yet.
Thanks, Dr. Ellen, for clarifying that. Thank you.
I would make a motion, we approve the administrative recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Joel. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are now on to item G, consideration of A&E firm for safety and security upgrades.
Thank you. Similar to the last item, a selection committee was established to choose, select an architect and engineering firm as it relates to the district-wide safety and security upgrades. That selection committee was very similar in makeup as the previous, with a couple addition. We had, with one addition, we had Eric Ripley, our executive director of CTE and technology director, a part of that, as safety and security would include a number of things in his realm. And then, of course, just our CMAR was a part of that process as well. We did get 3 written responses from A&E Services, included EAPC, ICON, and JLG. And after reviewing those submissions, we always narrowed down to 3, so we interviewed all 3 of those. They were evaluated according to the guidelines provided in North Dakota Century Code. All told, EAPC received the highest overall score and is the selection committee's recommendation for services. I can tell you this was more difficult than when you have just the one response. I think we had 3 quality, very high quality responses, and this committee even, had varied member to member on exactly who was that leading candidate or whatnot. I think we could have been very satisfied with any of the 3, but EAPC did come with a strong proposal, and that's why the selection committee is recommending them for approval.
What was the thought process of hiring just one firm versus hiring 2 or 3 just to provide continuity across the whole district throughout the buildings, rather than hiring 2 or 3 architectural firms to do 3 buildings each or something?
Yeah, exactly. Making sure that the standardized measures, whether it is a controlled perimeter or it's a surveillance equipment or whatnot, that we would have one in charge of all those projects, and then they could establish the schedule and work accordingly with it too.
Any other questions on this item? Go ahead.
So how does this correspond to Valley Middle School's plans for safe? I don't know if it's a great question. I hadn't thought of it till now, but I'm just kind of thinking about the planning that's going into Valley Middle School, and then this architectural firm working on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to want to make sure that those plans are completely in sync, as well as the CIA, as well as the possible Twining school coming. We want to make sure that we're in sync for a number of reasons, and very least of all, maintenance even, just to make sure we're familiar with our own systems. One advantage we have for that seamlessness between Valley Middle School and safety and security is we have the same CMAR, or construction manager at risk. So construction engineers will be a part of every one of these projects.
Any other questions on this item? Okay, I'll look for a motion for approval for EAPC as the considered firm for A&E for safety and security upgrades. Motion by Bill. There's second. Second by Josh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll now move on to consideration of resolution authorizing and establishing the terms of $30 million in general obligation school building bonds. Brandon?
Yes, thank you. So there's a little bit of history here, but just to kind of back into that, on March 6th, our body adopted the initial resolution for these issuance of up to $79 million in general obligation bonds. This was proposed for the scope of the referendum. Then with that, we also did go to special election May 16th, and that vote ultimately was upheld in favor of the resolution. And so this here is coming back to call in those dollars. There's a couple of different mechanisms. We're lucky in the state of North Dakota where we have the Bank of North Dakota that we could leverage. And rather than selling those bonds on the private market for what would be a higher rate, we're able to take a note with the Bank of North Dakota at 2%. So one thing worth noting is when we ask the question of the public of $79 million, we have to estimate how much that will cost and what is the tax impact. And at the time, the estimate was that this would cost 21.54 mils a year, or ultimately about $97 a year on every $100,000 of value. When we're able to leverage the Bank in North Dakota for 30 million of the 79, that will reduce the cost and will reduce the tax burden on our residents. It's worth pointing out, and that's how thankful we are for the Bank of North Dakota. So we have received the approval on that bank loan from the Bank of North Dakota for $30 million. This resolution authorizes the district to issue those general obligation bonds in the principal amount of $30 million. So administrative recommendations to adopt the resolution authorizing and establishing the terms of $30 million general obligation school building bonds series 2023, creating a sinking fund therefore and pledging taxes for the payment. And that document is attached.
Are there any questions for Brandon? I have a motion for approval. Motion by Dr. Lunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dave. Any discussion? Being in real estate, I always tell people don't look at the amortization schedule, so just breeze past that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on to the resolution for levying tax for general obligation bonds. Brandon?
Yes, thank you. This memo has much of that same prelude as it's part and parcel to what was just approved here. What is attached on this one is a resolution levying tax for general obligation bonds. So this is providing the authority to levy those dollars which would pay for the bonds or the loan with the Bank of North Dakota. So this is to levy and certify to the county auditor that a portion of the tax is required. So administrative recommendations to approve this resolution, the resolution levying tax for general obligation bonds and pledging taxes for their.
Any question? I'll seek a motion for approval. Motion by Bill. Second by Jeff. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Last item under superintendent recommendations for action, general fund statement.
Yes, thank you. This is the first of our 12 financial statements and may very well be the least exciting as there's not much that has come in just yet. So this is just reflective of July 1 through July 31. You'll see that total revenues during this period was $112,757, whereas the expenses were $1.88 million. And this would put, the expenses were $1.99 million. This would put expenses over revenues of $1.88 million. You could walk through the report, but there's really not a lot. I would just point to on the first page, which is electronic page 83 of the packet, is that you'll have preliminary budget at the header or the column header for the 2023-24 budget, just to say this is still reflective of a preliminary budget and that won't be finalized until October 10th. And you'll just see that 0.1% of our revenues have come in at this point, whereas 1.6% of our expenditures have come in. The second report, always included here, beginning on electronic page 86, is the comparative from the year prior. So you can see last year's report looked very similar to this. Otherwise, with that, and I'd be happy to answer Any questions, but administrative recommendations to approve the general fund financial statement for the period of July 1, 2023 through July 31, 2023 is presented.
Any questions? Go ahead.
On the last page, the general fund balance, is that an anomaly because we don't have all our accounting done, or is it higher than the last 2 years because that's what we wanted it to be?
It's a timing issue. It is going to be stronger than the other 2 years, which is what we wanted, but to be that strong, we may have been just ahead in our accounting.
Okay, I'll seek a motion for approval. Motion by Cynthia. Is there a second? Second by Josh. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Any announcements? Go ahead.
So announcement and a thank you. A thank you to Amy Barch and her academic team for leading a successful new certified staff onboarding last week. We had, I think it was 112 new certified staff come into our district. Lots of great energy around that training all week. It was fantastic, and we are poised and ready to welcome the rest of our teaching and para staff tomorrow. So it's an exciting week for Grand Forks Public Schools, and don't forget, school starts on the 30th. Excited to see kids as well.
Go ahead.
I would just, on August 10th, we held a STEM conference out at UND at the Memorial Union, and I would just want to publicly say we had 24 sessions throughout the day, and 14 of those sessions were led by Grand Forks Public Schools teachers, and 10 of those sessions were led by UND staff. And it was just a great culmination of people working together and coming together. And I think that we had about 150 teachers from across the state in attendance, and it was really well received. In fact, a gentleman came up from Bowman, North Dakota. And so it was super interesting to hear, to be honest, to hear what he's teaching as well, and that he drives the bus, right? I mean, so it was just super interesting to talk to him and see how things are for him in Bowman. And so we're hoping to do it again next year out at UND, so we'll keep you posted. But that was really, I think it was just a really good day for a lot of people, and a lot of teachers got some really good teaching strategies to use STEM in their classrooms. So that was really cool. So thank you for all of that, for all your support. My question would be I would want to hear, I know we're lucky, I think, to hire 112 new staff from what I hear across the state. I'd be really curious about like what we're doing for positions we weren't able to find people to fill, if it's something we could look.
Okay. Any other board requests for future considerations? Go ahead, Cynthia.
Brandon mentioned Twining School, and I have had some questions that I haven't been able to answer, so that would be good to know. And then I'd appreciate a busing update, just in general, in terms of including how the hiring of drivers has gone, how ridership is, and then I do have a question about how schools are selected to have busing and how some don't have busing.
The board will hear an update on Twining on September 11th. So we'll get an update there. And then again on September 26th. So it'll be up for discussion, and then there'll be an action item on the 26th agenda. I am curious, just with all of the things that we have out, I think sometimes things get lost in the weeds with a RFQ and a RFP and a bond and this. Maybe there's like just a small cheat sheet portion for the Friday focus that we could include, just kind of layman's terms, breaking down those terminology and how they apply to some of the things that we're approving. So I think it's hard sometimes to think like, is this like action we're digging tomorrow, or is this the very, very potential phase? So if we can have that'd be good. Any other requests for consideration? Here. School board norms, Dave, how do we do?
I thought we did very well, particularly thoughtful deliberation, conversation, and questions. I just think we're digging at the right things, and perhaps it's because we took a photo together before we started, so maybe we could do that once in a while, set us off on the right foot.
We are now adjourned. Thank you.
You asked.
Do we need